Howdy, I'm Kat and I'm back. So this video I want to talk about the faiths, the different religions, and what I think is going to happen in Westeros with these faiths. And actually, dudes at Game of Thrones Academy have already done a video, and I'm sure some other people have. But those guys, I like theirs because they, talked about history and what happened to faith in history. So and how that reflects on what's going to happen in Westeros. And in fact, they gave me the idea about to expand and fill in some gaps of things that they said on their video. So roll over there and catch their video about the faith in Game of Thrones. Now, let's talk about what faiths that we know exist. So we have the Druidic faith of the Children of the Forest, where they worship the gods in the trees, and they believe that their souls go into the trees, and they join like this conglomerate hive mind kind of thing, that they forever are in the trees and witness all the happenings on earth. And they worship the trees as sacred, and the people in the north largely follow that concept. Then we have the dudes over in Ironborn, or the Iron Islands, and they have their drowned god. What was dead will rise again. That's kind of Christian-like, right? It will rise again, stronger and better. Okay, and it's a single god, and they've had that god forever, even though some of the other people have changed their religion. Then we have the faith of the Seven, which came over with the Andals, and Hugor of the Hill, or Hugor Hill, had the seven mother, father, warrior, blah, 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 come to him and tell him to make this trip across the ocean to Westeros. And maybe it was one of those, messianic messages of saving himself, but end up, of course, conquering Westeros, which is largely what happened with the Christianity in some ways. So then we have Roholar. I might be pronouncing that wrong. It's the god of light. He's a single god, and he brings the light and purifies people through the fire, etc., etc. He's monotheistic. And then over there in Essos, you have a number of other religions, including the one that's of the Harpy. I thought that really, there was a couple different religions that really came to my mind about, and particularly the ones that had matriarchal worship. The Scythians way back in the day, the steppe people on the Russian steppes, they had a matriarchal religion, and their goddess, they would carve their goddess in horse bones, like the horse knuckle bones, that would make it look like the woman's body. It's pretty cool. You should look it up. So the Scythians had a matriarchal goddess that most historians relate closely to Artemis, the huntress. So in any event, so you have all these different religions now, but in Westeros, there's the three religions that are established, and you have the one that's being brought over by the Red Priestess, or the Red Priest and Priestess is Roholar. So historically, here's what happens with religion in England. So in England actually had two prominent religions, and first it starts out with Catholicism. There's only one, Catholics, and the head of the church is the Pope. He's like the Sept, or the Sparrow, whatever one you want to call him. And of course they have the triad, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. But then you also have the Mother, and you have Saint Joseph, and you have all these saints that kind of are representative in a certain way in the religion of the Seven in Westeros, and including the stranger, who is death, and Christianity has that as the pale rider who comes on a pale horse, and he comes for everybody. So that's very similar to Catholicism. So in England, Catholicism was the main religion. And then a couple of things happened all at once to change things. Everybody always focuses on this one idea, and that is that, there was Henry VIII, and he was married to Catherine of Aragon, and she had only given him one girl child, and he was cognizant of those years of the wars of the Tudors with the wars of succession, and how devastating it was, and how many of the royal family had been killed off. So he was trying to devise a method by which there would be an heir, and this thing that he had created in England would not be destroyed based on the wars of succession, on some coming war of succession. Succession. Yes, that did in fact happen, and he tried to divorce Catherine Aragon, and he sent his most closest advisor, which is Cardinal Wolsey, to go to the Pope and ask him to sign the divorce papers. And depending on who you ask, or who you read anyways, Cardinal Wolsey either did his best to convince the Pope, and the Pope said, adios, no way, or he kind of sucked at it on purpose because he was a good Catholic. At the end of the day, he was a Catholic priest, and he really didn't believe in divorce. And, there was these things that maybe were kind of fraudulent circling around about, whether there was a dispensation or not for Henry VIII to marry Catherine of Aragon, because she had been engaged and or married to his brother, and his brother died, and Catherine said, well, we didn't consummate it. Sounds like science, all right? We didn't consummate our relationship, so there was no real marriage. And back in the medieval days, if you were married, if somebody was your sister-in-law, she was, when you got married, you were flesh of my flesh and blood of my blood, so you were really the brother and sister. So if you got married, incest, nasty. But so you required a dispensation for the Pope. The Pope told Henry VIII to go, bugger himself, basically. And so Henry VIII, according to the simplest version, decided that he would, take control of the church in England, and he would separate it and say that Pope is no longer the head of the church, that he was the head of the church. Okay, so that is one thing that actually did happen. And this is what the guys over at GOT Academy were talking about, that they expect that in order to get control of the faith, which right at this moment is kind of crazily overshadowing the rulers, that somebody is going to have to do something where they combine the faith and the state in some manner, the way that Henry VIII did. Now, there were some other things, though, that went on that caused Protestantism to come to the fore. Because remember, almost everybody's Catholic except for some small groups of people in England. And these are Calvinists and or Puritans, and they're the first versions of Quakers. And they are starting to appear in England. So why are they starting to appear in England? Well, Catholicism, the masses before were said in Latin. And really, who spoke Latin? Very few people. Some lords and ladies might have been educated to speak Latin, but sure as hell not the common dude down on the street. He didn't know what the hell he was hearing when he was at the Mass. All he knew was, the dude was saying some awesome things, and he needed to get up there and take communion, do the cross thing, kneel and pray when he was told, and take confession. But he really didn't understand all the things that the Mass was saying, and he couldn't read the Bible because the Bible was either in Greek or Latin. So he couldn't read it. So how did these Calvinists or Puritans come along? Well, the other fantastical thing that was happening right at the same time that Henry VIII was making this big play for religion was the Gutenberg Press. Now, you might have heard of this, but the Gutenberg Press, I believe it was 1535 when it was invented, and the first and biggest thing that it started printing that was the #1 seller was the Bible. And they printed this Bible by the thousands in different languages, English, German, and French. And so now the common dude on the street could open up the Bible and read it and be like, oh, that's what, so the priest said this, but that's not what it sounded like to me. Or, I think it sounds better as this way. And so you get these guys, this is where Protestantism comes from. Information is now in the lowest common denominator, and people can make decisions for themselves. And if you look in Westeros right now, the Sparrow, the High Septon, when Tommen came to talk to him, and everybody comes to talk to him, he's always at the altar, and he's reading from the Book of the Seven, right? But probably most of the people in Westeros didn't read, even the nobles, but they did hear the stories and they memorized them to some extent, because you hear Marjorie talking about it, but she really didn't. Marjorie really didn't memorize that until the chick was in the cell with her, reading from it over and over and over again. So that's how she knows, and that's how the common people knew in England, you know, what stories or what concepts they're supposed to know, was because that's what the priest did, is the priest told them the story. And so they just memorized it. They didn't contemplate it. They didn't read anything else in the book. And that's what's going on in Westeros. So now my question is, are we going to see the advent of the printing press in Westeros? Because we haven't seen it yet. But there has to be something that's going to change the concept of faith at the lowest common denominator, because you don't get the big change in England without that happening, and you can't get it in Westeros without the common people figuring out and adopting faith for themselves. So I'm going to pause right there, because I'm going to do part 2 so that these videos aren't super long, and talk about the rest of what happens to faith and what might happen in Westeros. So once again, is there a book, and is this book going to be widely distributed to the people, and are they going to be taught to read? Is that one of the changes that will come in the future? There will be schools for the common dude on the street, and he will at least know how to read some basic words and do some arithmetic, and he will no longer be just a serf plowing the damn field. I'll see you in a little bit. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you later. Bye.